Could I just ask you to sort of link up what you've been saying about the way in which the domestic politics interacts with the regional vortex and the anarchy in Northeast Asia, just to comment on something that has come out of our previous interview, which was with Barry Buzan and Evelyn Goh, and they sketched out 5 different scenarios for Northeast Asia in the context of a study they did addressing Sino-Japanese alienation. But they saw one possibility as reinforced US ringholding in the region. A second one, some kind of a US and China condominium. A third one, a US withdrawal and perhaps a China-Japan condominium or Asia for Asians sort of scenario. And a fourth one would be Chinese hegemony, and the fifth one would be power competition and maybe new Cold War conditions affecting East Asia. I mean, do you think from the South Korean or indeed the North Korean perspective, any of those scenarios would be desirable or feasible?
In fact, this morning I had a webinar with Ambassador Cassie Stevens, for special forum to commemorate 12th anniversary of the passage of President Kim Dae-jung. In fact, that issue really come out. But for us, the best thing is what? U.S.-China go together. Okay. Yeah. They pursue, whether it is bihegemony or peaceful coexistence, whatever, what Kelly kissing the course in the co-evolution, whatever. We want US and China cooperate together. US-China confrontation will be a curse to us, not only to us, to Japan too, Taiwan, and all others. Therefore, for us, all other alternatives seem to be rather irrelevant. The most ideal thing is what? US-China work together, create a new international regional structure so that we can live peacefully and with prosperity. That is what we want. We want, Pax Sinica, Chinese hegemony. We do not want the so-called, alternative bihegemony between China and Japan. Okay. We don't want American hegemony, which often lacks responsibility and accountability. We don't want. Okay. We want in the initial stage, U.S.-China, bihegemony or G2 or peaceful coexistence, and eventually, evolving into some sort of, credible and sustainable multilateral, cooperation, not only in just the security area, but also in economic and other areas too.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Could I just conclude by asking Peter one question about a very interesting proposal that you came up with about a biodiversity corridor along the northeastern spine of, or the eastern spine of the Korean Peninsula, which you were kind of flagging as a way of building peaceful relationships. And I guess this goes with the kind of functional ideas of the peace economy that Chung-in was talking about. But could you tell us just a little bit about how you see that? Is that a practical idea? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's actually a lot going on the ground and has been for a long time that pertains to this, but I'll try and say it very briefly. I think of this as geo-ecology, just as there's geoeconomics, geopolitics, a biodiversity corridor that would link the remnant habitats of the Russian Far East, the Chinese Northeast provinces, even as far afield as Mongolia for some migratory species, with North Korea, South Korea, Japan, would be a classic peace park. There are quite a few of these around the world, some in the Middle East, some in Central America, there's one in Southern Africa, and these can in turn not only create link otherwise isolated and not sustainable genetic pools of species in remnant habitats, but can create the ability to maintain through movement that genetic stock over the long haul. Now, this, of course, has a particular salience in Korea, given the way that watersheds and ridgelines historically shaped Korean language and culture, but it's actually something that pertains to the whole region as well. And so, for example, there is already a Russian, or there has been in the past, a Russian, North Korean, Chinese project to track the Siberian tiger across the border in northeast China. There's a long-standing proposal to make a peace park of the demilitarized zone, and then to link that through a series of mountainous ridgelines all the way to the southern part of the Korean Peninsula to Jeju Island, and then for other species that are migratory to Japan, and all the way down the East Asia Flyway. Some of those birds actually fly all the way to Australia, near where I'm talking to you from, and back each year. So that's the core concept. But I did want to just flip back to geopolitics and domestic politics, the points that Chung-in was making. I just want to make one comment on that. It seems to me COVID makes a mess of the map. COVID is going to complicate the scenarios that you sketched. It's going to make them very fuzzy. It's going to jumble them up and remix them. The term that a lot of political geographers are using is respatialize everything at every level. If we're in a permanent pandemic era, not just a passing COVID era, but we can expect more and worse pandemics to come on as we continue to trespass into the habitats where these species are spawned and live most of the time, but then cross over to humanity, and then we very quickly transmit these diseases around the world. That will force changes in force structures. I'm talking military force structures, in the economic base of military power, on the deployment of troops because of their infection risk, either to themselves or to host nations. It'll favor weapons that are long distant, precise, and spatially distancing. And in a sense, nuclear weapons are the most spatially distanced weapons on the planet at the moment. They may be particularly suited to a pandemic era. But we do know one thing right now. If we don't have a China-US global concert that brings together their complementary manufacturing and logistics capabilities, this pandemic is not going to end. It's going to continue, and it's going to get worse. And of course, COVID nationalism will exacerbate the current crisis. So it may be that COVID actually is the forcing function that brings about a US-China concert. And if that's the case, all the other issues that divide them will be subordinated and reshaped by that concert. And that will include dealing with the black hole of North Korea, currently completely and utterly isolated, not by sanctions, but by its own COVID management strategy. And until that's overcome, it's impossible to engage North Korea except at long distance. And that's not going to end anytime soon, because in part, the regime is using COVID control as a way to actually reshape its domestic politics and its domestic surveillance and control system. It doesn't necessarily seek to open up rapidly or vaccinate its population at this point. So this is a very dangerous but long-term game that we should be playing to bring North Korea into whatever that US-China concert and multilateral strategy to deal with pandemics in the future looks like at the regional level. And then we can get back to the business of engagement and trust building. And to me, it ultimately comes down to really one-on-one understandings that transform how people think. Certainly, I was confronted with my preconceptions about being an Australian and then later an American when I went to North Korea, because they reminded me of things that I didn't know about at all or had forgotten about what Americans had done to Koreans in the course of the war in 1950 to 53, and of course before and after. Equally, when we were working with North Koreans, I remember one young guy, we were actually staying on a waterfront hotel in Nampo. And at night, you can look at the stars because all the lights are turned out. There's no electric power. And he liked to smoke. And we had gone down to the waterfront. I don't normally smoke, except when I'm in North Korea. You have to smoke when you're in North Korea if you want to make friends. And so we were sitting there lying on our backs, looking at the stars, smoking. And Mr. Lee said to me, you know, I'm really surprised. And I said, what are you surprised by? And he said, well, you Americans, you've come here. You're on the other side of the demilitarized zone. You have no way to get out. And you're building this plant, this power plant in our village. We don't really understand why, but we're beginning to respect Americans as a result. But I can't introduce you to my girlfriend. And I said, why not? And he said, because she's too frightened to meet you. We've understood what you're on about, but she can't bring herself to meet you. So it's when we get to that next step, whether it's a General Kim or a Mr. Lee, that we're going to start to see these barriers break down. And that takes bloody hard work. It's slog, it's long-term, but that's what it takes to overcome 50, 60 years of war without another war. Peace doesn't get built overnight.
Okay, on behalf of the Toda Peace Institute, then I'd like to thank you both for bringing huge amounts of wisdom to what's a kind of extraordinarily tangled set of interconnected problems, very much a wicked problem area. And I hope that whether you focus from a geopolitical level or a domestic political level, that you both have the will and the enthusiasm to continue the good work that you've been doing, to try and build bridges across these boundaries of difference, to try and reunify this kind of extraordinarily disunited country at the moment, and to bring wider peace to Northeast Asia. I just want to congratulate both of you for the work you've done in the past. And I hope that both of you might be willing to continue to do this work in the future. And from a Toda perspective, we'll certainly help you in whatever ways possible, both at the level of people-to-people exchanges, in terms of highlighting superordinate goals which might foster collaboration, but most of all by providing opportunities for all of you to think about bringing people who wouldn't normally come together to do that kind of deep listening that Peter's just been talking about.